Hey everyone, Dockwell here, and welcome to another one of my Dota 2 hero guides. Today we're going to be taking a look at Centaur. Before we jump into the video, I just wanted to say if you like this video, like, comment, subscribe, all of those kinds of things, it really helps. And if you want to see more content into the future, please consider clicking the Patreon link down below and going to my Patreon, signing up for coaching, or just supporting me in general for that $5 or $10 a month. It really helps because for whatever reason, YouTube has not monetized my channel, so I make absolutely no money for making all this content. So in order to keep up making content the future, if you guys really like it and you want to see more of it, please consider supporting if you can. Now that we got that out of the way, let's jump back to the video. So Centaur is an offlane hero, pretty much only played as an offlane hero, and as such, how do we think about Centaur? Well, Centaur is kind of your basic quintessential offlaner in that he's a very tanky strength hero that kind of just beefs up. He's a very good frontliner. He can stand in front. He's hard to take down. He's pretty much the hero that, you know, if you sit in front and you tank a lot of spells, that's exactly what you want to do in the fights, because if they use all their spells to kill you, they're not using their spells to kill your teammates. The other thing that he does is he also has the blink initiation role of most offlaners or a lot of offlaners. So he also does that. So he's not just a tanky frontliner. He can also blink initiate. He usually buys blink dagger. He has a stun. He has that part in his kit as well. So basically, Centaur is just that typical quintessential offlaner. I think for a lot of players that are new to Dota, getting into Dota, or want to start playing that offlane role, I think Centaur is a great hero to start with. He's pretty simple. He's not that complicated. He's not really flashy. He doesn't do anything like crazy, but he's just really good, you know, fundamentally a good hero, a good overall, just standard hero in the offlane. Does a little bit of everything and does everything pretty well. Gets tanky, front lines, blink initiation, etc. And also has a team fight ultimate ability, which is pretty good. But he can also do a significant amount of damage if you get a lot of items on him. So don't underestimate the damage that this hero can do. He can dish out damage too. He just doesn't deal like a ton of damage like a lot of other heroes. Like some other offlaners can deal a ton of damage. He doesn't really deal damage like some other offlaners, like maybe Timbersaw or something like that. He's not just going to, like, you know, burst you down with pure damage from spells like a Timbersaw does. He also doesn't have the best laning stage. He's not like a crazy lane dominator, but he's consistent. He's just a very consistent all-around hero. So that's how to think about Centaur. Now let's jump in and take a look at his abilities. So now that we understand Centaur in general, we can take a look at his abilities and see how he's able to be that great all-around offlaner like I talked about. So first, we're going to take a look at his Q ability, Hoof Stomp. And this Hoof Stomp ability is pretty straightforward, pretty simple. You see there's an AoE there, and you press the ability, and it has a small animation. Everything in the AoE gets stunned and takes a little bit of damage. So I'll actually show you on creeps here because it also works on creeps. So we'll put free spells on. So it stuns the creeps. The creeps take a little bit of damage. It's not like a super high damaging spell, but it does significant amount of damage, especially early on. If you do max this out or you get a bunch of levels, you're not usually going to max this out first or anything, but it is pretty good for just doing some damage. And the stun duration is fairly long, and actually I think there's a talent that makes the stun a little bit longer as well. So this is a pretty significant stun. It's also an AoE stun, so although it's not the biggest AoE, you also have a very long cast animation, so you can like cast it and cancel it, and it is dodgeable with BKB and stuff like that. It's a very significant low cooldown stun for a lot of different portions in the game. It's a very good stun. So that's Hoof Stomp. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple, very decent spell. Next, we're going to take a look at Double Edge. So Double Edge is an ability that does damage based on your strength. So this hero gets very tanky. You buy a lot of strength items. You will eventually get like hearts and other things like that to just get tanky naturally. And then with that, you can use Double Edge to do a ton of damage. So what you do is you just click this on an enemy, and then you take damage, and then you do damage to the enemy. So it's like kind of like Slark's Q. So it is something where you have to be careful because you take damage as well as the enemy, but it's based on your strength, and when you get really tanky, what'll happen usually is that you will take less damage, or you'll have more regen based on your items that it won't do much to you, and it'll do a lot to the enemy. So that's usually what happens, but it is something that you need to be careful because that kind of return damage on yourself is important to keep in mind. So you don't want to constantly spam this in lane, but it is something that once you get some good regen items, once you get something like a Vanguard, it's going to be a lot better to use this because you have more regen, etc. So that's Double Edge. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. It's a good ability, especially once you scale with items and things like that. It won't do much damage to you, but you can dish out significant damage once you get a lot of strength on this hero and you get a lot of levels. So that's Double Edge. Next, we're going to look at Retaliate. So this is a passive ability, and this is essentially like a blade mail. So whenever you get attacked, basically you do return damage or retaliate damage to the enemy that's attacking you. So you see the axe is attacking me, and the axe is taking damage when he's attacking me. So it's a little bit like Blade Mail, or it's a little bit like Spectre in that sense, that not only are you naturally getting strength, you're buying strength items, you are a strength hero, and you're getting super tanky, but that's also translating into damage when they try to click you down. So it's one of those things that really right-click carries don't love going on you later in the game, because they're just going to take a ton of damage when they try to kill you through all of your HP that you have. So it's one of these things that it's just another way to get very, very tanky. You can see there's base damage, there's strength return damage as well, so that also scales with your strength. So this hero just gets super tanky. It's very, very hard to kill Centaur later in the game. And when you do get tanky and they do try to kill you, it's honestly sometimes a good thing when you die, because they have to blow so many spells on you to just, you know, bring you down, that they don't have anything left in the tank to kill your other your allies. And a lot of times you can escape with, like, you know, a 4th HP, 10% HP, etc., because it just takes so much to bring you down. So those are all of his main abilities. And now last we'll look at Stampede. This is his ultimate, and you just click Stampede, and then you basically just get like haste movement speed, and you can also run through enemies and they take damage, and the enemies are briefly slowed, so you can catch up to them. So this is a very, very good ability for basically catching up to people and also running away from people. Also, the other thing about this is it's not just you, it's everybody else on your team also gets Stampede. So it's a global ability that lets pretty much everyone on your team escape or chase heroes down. So it's kind of a dual purpose. It's either to get away, so, you know, let's say something is happening all the way across the map in the laning stage. Once you hit 6, you can press Stampede, and then your carry can run away, or your mid can run away. Or, let's say you're chasing somebody down, or you see somebody else in the other lane getting chased down. You can press Stampede, then, you know, your entire team can chase them down, catch up, land some spells, do extra damage, etc. So that little bit of slow that you apply, and that damage you do when you run over people is also important as well. So that's Stampede. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple, but a good all-around ability to add that extra mobility, that extra chase potential, that extra team fight ability and escape, because it can be very, very good in team fights to kind of disengage or engage in general, etc. So a very, very good all-around hero, kind of like you see here. Those are all of his main abilities. Now, I will actually talk about the Shard and the Ags. So the Ags is pretty good, because what the Ags does is it upgrades your Stampede, and now what happens is all the allies and you, basically everyone on your team, gets damage reduction when Stampede is active. So when you press Stampede, this can be very, very good against like any kind of team fight ability that's a good initiation. So anything like Ravage, Black Hole, anything like even Chronosphere, where even though you might not benefit from running away, it's very, very good if your team gets initiated on. You can just press this and they get a lot of damage reduction, and it's very, very hard to bring them down. So it's a good way to kind of counter any kind of initiation. Then you can reset the fight, and then you can go on to the enemy and kill the enemy and return that fight, counter-initiate yourself, etc. So that's really, really good. And the other thing that this Ag's Shard does is this Shard actually allows you to do more damage, because what it does is every time you use Double Edge here, you actually get a stack for a certain amount of time, and it, you know, resets after a while if you don't get another stack, and it basically just gives you more strength. It makes you tankier and tankier and tankier, and you're doing more and more damage because of this, and also you're harder and harder to kill. So it's a very, very good way of making you do a lot of damage, because over time, once you get these max stacks, and you can see the duration refreshes and you get 5 stacks max. Once you get these 5 stacks, you do a ton of damage. Look at this. I do 377 damage per Double Edge on this dummy target, and it's a 4-second cooldown. And if I buy more strength items, like let's say, let's refresh here. Let's say I do this here. Let's say I buy, like, I don't know, like 2 hearts. Let's just, for experimentation. That's doing a significant amount of damage. If I do that there, 519 damage on a 4-second cooldown, that's pretty significant. And you can see, once I have all this HP, it's doing like barely any damage to myself. It's like really, it almost doesn't matter with the regen that I have. So anyway, I know 2 hearts is kind of unrealistic, but still, this ability can actually make you super tanky and do a lot of damage in team fights. It builds up over time. It's really, really good. So that's the Ag Scepter and the Shard. And the last thing I'm just going to show you is basically how to play Centaur in general. A lot of what you want to do is just blink initiate. So blink in, press Q, you know, Double Edge, and then maybe, you know, you need to Stampede to catch up to them or to run over heroes, etc., etc. So it's pretty straightforward, pretty simple. You you use your Blink Dagger to jump in, use your Hoof Stomp, and then Double Edge, and then you keep clicking them. And then if they try to kill you, you have Retaliate, you have all the strength, you can even get out if you're in trouble, these kinds of things. So this hero is just a great all-around offlaner, does a little bit of everything, very tanky, good initiation, good team fight abilities, etc. So that's Centaur, those are his abilities. Now let's jump into a game and see how he's played. So now we're jumping into a replay here of Rajix playing offlane Centaur, and this hero is just a very consistent, stable offlaner, like I said, especially in the laning stage. So you can see how he takes Hoof Stomp level 1. He was saving his point, but he just takes it basically to get aggressive, to secure some CS, to secure range creeps, etc. It's just a pretty good level 1 spell because that level 1 Retaliate doesn't offer very much flexibility. You kind of just sit there and you're just tanky, but level 1 you don't have Vanguard, you don't really have many items, so you're not really super tanky, so it's just better to go that Hoof Stomp. Just gives you a little bit more of a dynamic play. It also does good damage, and also is a pretty long stun level 1, and if you have 2 melee heroes that you're laning against, you can get a double stun off, like we saw there. So it's just pretty good to go for Hoof Stomp level 1, and then basically from there, once you secure the first wave, it's honestly just going to be pretty straightforward and pretty simple, pretty consistent what this hero does, because once you secure your level 2, you're usually going to get a point in Retaliate here, like you see, and from then on, you're trading better with the enemy than almost any other hero in the game, in that you're obviously taking way less damage, or they're taking way more damage when they try to right-click you, so unless they have a ton of magic damage spells, like you're against a Jug or something that has spin, etc., you're just going to trade better. So the enemy, as you can see, pretty much through the duration here, they're just kind of ignoring the Centaur as much as possible because they don't want to click the Centaur because they know they're going to take more damage. So they're pretty much going on the Dark Willow, and the Centaur is just allowed to be aggressive, to right-click the enemy, to do whatever he wants and get as much CS as possible. And this is pretty much just what you're going to want to do as a Centaur. You're going to be able to do this almost every game, depending on some matchups. Obviously, you do need to be careful at times, but you can just lane pretty well, get your CS, get your items, get your Ring of Health, you know, really quickly. You can see he has a ton of HP. It's 3.5 minutes into the game. He's level 3. He has 1,000 HP. He has insane regen with this Ring of Health. He's going to be getting Vanguard quick, which is usually what you want to do. You usually rush Vanguard on this hero. He gets a solo kill on the Omni. He's cutting waves at 3 minutes. This hero is just crazy tanky, very, very hard to deal with. It's something, you know, and this is something that you can do pretty much in every game. I don't see why, especially in lower MMRs, if you're a newer player, you couldn't do something like this every game. Just a very, very consistent, hard to deal with hero. And as you can see, 5 minutes in, we're kind of going double speed here. He's not doing anything crazy. He's not doing anything super flashy. He's not a Timbersaw that's doing all these, you know, combos with his spells. He's not using abilities in any crazy way. It's just that he's being very consistent, very tanky, getting his CS and laning consistently and like cutting waves and things like that. Now, the one thing I will say, the last thing about the laning stage is you do want to be careful with tanking too many creeps and tanking or using Double Edge too much. You're going to be getting some points in this, but when you use Double Edge, especially before you have Vanguard, you do need to be careful, because honestly, the one way that you're going to kind of hurt your own laning stage is by using Double Edge too much early on before you have enough HP regen to really spam it out. So that's what I would say, is just be a little bit careful. But now that he has his Vanguard, now that he has 3 points in Retaliate, he can kind of tank almost everything, but you can see how he's not really using Double Edge too much. It's just he's only using it when he knows that the enemy's low and he can get away with, you know, trading that little bit of HP for some extra harass. Otherwise, he's getting his CS. Now that he has his Vanguard, he can push the tower, he can cut waves, he can farm the big camp, he can do literally whatever he wants. He can get whatever items he wants, and I would usually suggest from here, after the Vanguard, to get boots, maybe phase boots, and then Blink Dagger. And this is just a consistent way that you can play Centaur in every single laning stage. And obviously, you're going to have some bad matchups against heavy magic damage, or, you know, early on in the lane before you get super tanky, you might have to be careful a little bit. But after you get some levels, man, and especially after you get your Vanguard, you can pretty much do this every single game. So that's Centaur's laning stage. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. Now, I jumped ahead like a minute or two, and I just want to show you this little sequence here, how you can use your hero and your ultimate especially to chase down heroes. So they chase down the Axe, they get the last hit to kill on Axe, and he does end up going down here to the Lycan ult because Lycan is full health, but he's just able to use his ultimate to, you know, get off a really good team fight. They are able to get 2 kills, 1 kill on the Axe, 1 kill on the Grimstroke there, and then unfortunately for him, he's pretty low health because of the Double Edges and other things that were used. And Lycan's a pretty strong hero early on in the game like this, so he ends up going down, unfortunately for him, but that wasn't that big of a deal. It was a 2-for-2 trade. He is pretty tanky otherwise, but like I said, there are some things you do have to be careful of, and like a Lycan ult is one of them before you get, too many items there in the early game. But the other thing, after he spawns, I want to show you when he spawns what happens and what he chooses to do. He chooses to go bottom again, obviously because his Ursa's top. The Ursa does get a kill on the TA, which is really good for them. But essentially, once the Lycan ult is down, and he knows that he pretty much is not scared of anything on the map anymore. So Lycan obviously wants to take this tower, but once he shows up, there's just absolutely nothing that the Lycan can do. He gets a good stomp off. Obviously, the Invoker's here as well, so there's pretty much just, like, nothing that this Lycan can do. He doesn't have ult. He can't run away. And then he obviously defends towers. This is something you want to do. Once you're this tanky, you have, this good of a start. You want to defend towers, so he goes to defend bottom. He did that twice now. And then look at how aggressive he's being on the map here. He knows this tower does, like, no damage to him now that he has this Helm of Iron Will. Like, he has 19 regen, and this tower's doing literally nothing to him. So he just cuts the wave here, tanks the tower, and lets the tower do insane damage to itself by hitting him. And there's just not, he's like afraid of pretty much absolutely nothing here. The wolves are hitting him. There's enemies coming to defend the tower, but they can't really do anything. He's pushing with that catapult there. So this is something you can do, obviously, on the bottom lane. You could potentially do this on the mid lane. You could do this on the top lane with every catapult. Once you have the items that you need to be very tanky, you can push with all these catapults, and that's kind of the way you can get very aggressive. But you can see how aggressive he's being here. He just is afraid of almost nothing. So this hero is obviously very aggressive, very hard to kill, but you also want to be playing for your Blink Dagger, because you don't really do a lot until you have your Blink Dagger. You play more like a Bristleback, where you're up in people's face, you're hard to deal with, kind of like a Timbersaw early on, and then once you get your Blink Dagger timing, that's when you can kind of get a little bit more active. You can look for pickoffs around the map. Until then, your main way to get pickoffs or to be aggressive is to either just stand in an aggressive posture or use Stampede with the team. But especially early on, sometimes you want to save this to make sure it's good, to chase people down or to escape, especially, let's say your carry's in trouble or something like that. It is good to save it for that, or to only use it, in those circumstances where it's very, very good to use. But that's pretty much how you want to play Centaur, transitioning out of the laning stages. You want to defend towers. You want to put yourself in aggressive parts of the map. You can take towers with catapults at 10 minutes. It's just one of these things that your hero is very, very hard to deal with. So you want to play kind of like that Bristleback. Don't play, like, too crazy. Don't feed, obviously. You can't necessarily 1v5, like, truly 1v5, but it is very, very hard for the enemy to bring you down this early on in the game. And so you don't really have too much to be scared of. You obviously have to learn matchups and these kinds of things, but this is exactly how you want to be playing Centaur, transitioning out of the laning stage into that early game. Now, the next thing I want to show you here is basically just how to use your ultimate in a defensive way to get out. So we can see that the Ursa and the Invoker are top. So he just uses his ultimate to essentially allow the OD and the Dark Willow to escape. Now, the OD goes back in for some reason. So, unfortunately for him, this actually leads to him dying to the Wolves there on the back line. They didn't necessarily need to do that. But, yeah, that's pretty much how you can use your ult defensively. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple, but it's just a good example of how, the entire team could have gotten out there, and until they have enough chain stun, or unless they have enough chain stun on the enemy team, if it's just slows or other things like that, there's pretty much nothing they can do against the fact that if they're going on your team and this is a bad fight, we don't have enough people here, we need to get out, you can just press your ultimate, everybody can pretty much run away, and you're going to secure the fight. You're going to be safe from there, you're going to buy your team some time, these kinds of things, and then potentially you can turn the fight if you are in better positioning or they waste a lot of spells, etc. So that's just a good little example of how to use your ultimate defensively. Now, the last thing I want to show you, and yes, this is the last thing I'm going to show you because largely Centaur is a super simple hero to play. He's very straightforward, very easy. There's nothing really complicated about him. You're just kind of going to frontline and tank early on in the game like I showed you, and then after you get your Blink Dagger and it gets a little bit later and people have more items and stuff, you can't just put yourself in any position on the map. He does have 2 deaths here, largely because he put himself in vulnerable places on the map, and they did punish him kind of by all ganking him at the same time. But you can see once you get your Blink Dagger, once it's a little bit later into the game, it's still pretty early, but they do have a big lead. They smoke up, and he's going to look to get aggressive, and largely you want to initiate on this hero or counter-initiate with your Blink Dagger and your stun, and the enemy pretty much can't do anything about it because they don't really want to turn and try to kill the Centaur if you jump in. So we can see here, they have vision, he jumps in on the Omni, a great target on the back line to go on, and then he immediately presses his ult, and what this does is it allows his team to go in with him. So not everybody on his team has blink daggers. They all can't get in at the same time with him. So what he does is he gets that first stun off, he secures a kill on the Omni, and then he allows his entire team with the ultimate to be aggressive, to get in and to secure the fight. And we can see there 4 heroes just immediately killed. They do have a very, very big lead at 18 minutes, obviously, so they are crushing this game. That's just a great example of how to use Centaur. And you can see that once he goes in on the Omni, there's pretty much nothing the enemy can do because they don't want to turn on a 2.3k HP Centaur. And this is something that you can easily get. You know, you can easily have this much HP. You can be this tanky at 18 to 20 minutes almost every game, and it's very, very hard for the enemy to do anything about it. So from there, you just kind of, you use your stuns, you initiate, you frontline, you tank, and then you can see he gets this shard, and it allows him to do more damage, get even tankier in fights. This is a very easy, straightforward, simple hero to play from the off lane, and it's pretty reliable that you can be this tanky and be this good of an initiator in the game, in most games that you play. All you have to do is make sure you secure your laning stage, and then you'll be able to be kind of this beastly havoc causer, team fighter later on in the game consistently. So, as always, guys, thanks for watching. I hope this Centaur guide was good for you guys and helped you learn how to play the offlane role with Centaur specifically. As I said before, I think this is a really, really good hero for anybody that's kind of new to Dota or looking to play that kind of tanky initiation offlane role. So I hope this was good for you guys and that it helps you get better at Dota 2. As always, like, comment, subscribe, all of those kinds of things. Join the Discord if you haven't already. Go to my Patreon if you want to request coaching. Go to my Twitch. I will do replay reviews every single Friday, and I'll be streaming more into the future as well. So as always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.